Okay, so it's Paul Moffat here, and I'm with Asaf from Drkhorse Training, and we're having another Coach's Corner today. Today we're going to chat about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and we were chatting about how to get people motivated to ride on their own or otherwise, and tips and tricks and how to do that. So Asaf was just saying about getting his group of riders together for a Cypress ride this morning, and was surprised that no one had been motivated enough to kind of do that on their own. But as soon as someone spearheaded the movement, everyone was super keen to jump on board. So yeah, why don't you carry on the conversation, kind of sort of like where we left it off, Asaf, and yeah, let's
Sure. Thanks,
hop
Paul.
straight in.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, hello to all the listeners. Yeah, let's jump straight into it. So, this morning, like you said, I got a group ride out and it was great. It was a lot of fun. But it also made me think about why it had to wait till now to actually happen. Here in BC, we didn't have uh, very heavy restrictions on going out or going out with small groups. Um, but for some reason, a lot of people adhered to them and made them maybe stricter than they were imposed, and decided to just keep a distance from everybody else and stay on their own. However, those restrictions have been off for a little bit of time now, and still no movement has happened. Now, I've reached out to some of my athletes and I've asked them what's their um, where they're at right now mentally, and what they need or want, and a lot of them said that they feel kind of alone. They miss the group ride and they miss the having the interaction with other riders. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something. And initially I was building a schedule so that we can have scheduled rides so people can come to. But then until that is happening, I just sent out that text and had a few uh, um, that replied right away and said, "Yeah, great idea. Let's do it." And long story short, we went out this morning, and everybody had a great time. And that made me think, why is it that people waited till now? Like, if we know that a big part of your motivation is to have people around you, um, why people waited for me to send out that invite and couldn't go out on their own. So that's a very interesting. It's a very interesting question because it makes you see it both from the eyes of the athlete. Like, maybe sometimes they are motivated enough to take themselves out and enjoy it, but some maybe require that extrinsic motivation to have something else that draws them to it, and something else that really takes them out of the house and ride. And then on the other hand, what's the role of the coach? How does the coach recognizes the driving forces of their athletes and what they can do to help them through those situations?
Right. Yeah, and I think right now, having come through and still being in COVID restrictions and precautions, people are unsure, how to approach things again, and how to return to normal, so to speak. I feel like a lot of riders are like looking for permission almost, like what's acceptable and what isn't. We're kind of writing those rules as we go, and I think for the most part, riders in Vancouver are pretty respectful of things. Like I was just watching a video on the EV Facebook page. Someone put up a NorCal crit series, unofficial one that came out, and that to me is like pushing the borders right now. It's just not really a great time to be bumping elbows and potentially risking injury and riding in like unsanctioned numbers. But like we got the Cycling BC return to sport protocols recently, and riding in groups of 10 and making sure you're socially distanced, which on Cypress is the easiest thing to do. Like how much it only takes 30 seconds and no one's riding 2 meters close to each other. Everyone's spread apart. Pretty cool. But just the incentive to get out and go out with people, I think that's really it. Is everyone's just looking for a little bit of leadership, someone to take the helm and just put the ride together. And I think a lot of people are thinking about doing that, but no one wants to be responsible for either the potential backlash of someone having a problem with it, or just having the responsibility of organizing groups of people, which that's essentially what coaching is, taking on that responsibility. I have a funny anecdote. Before all of this happened, before even road biking, when I was BMXing, we used to love going to Hastings Bowl over at the P&E. It's like one of the raddest bowls in the Lower Mainland, and it's notoriously patrolled by skateboarders. Skateboarders don't like BMXs, but for the most part, we would get along. But if it got busy, there'd be high tension and stuff. So we'd have to try and find periods of the day where we could ride on our own and have as many runs as we wanted. And I figured out that if you got there before 11 a.m., you could have the bowl to yourself. So, but no one would turn up. So I started a Facebook page and I started texting people. I had an email thread and all this stuff. And once a week, I'd send it out, and we'd have a Wednesday, 8 a.m., bring your coffee, come and shred. And it took a little while to get traction, but once a few people got into it, it became a weekly thing. And it was awesome. And I was like, well, this is a sport where it is intrinsic in nature. There's no medals or money really for doing your tricks and all that. It's inherently intrinsic. The enjoyment that you get is purely from yourself and purely social, or sometimes not. I know a lot of guys who ride by themselves, but I couldn't believe that no one was prepared to do that on their own. And in the second I took a week off and I didn't send out the email, no one would show up. There might be one person, but if someone took the helm, then we would get up to 10 people, which is a busy day at that skate park. So even looking at different sports where it's a fringe sport and it's inherently intrinsic, it still required someone to give it momentum, which is kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's really where the second part of my question is talking about the role of the coach, right? So I think a lot of times that's the interesting thing is under times of serious challenges for the athlete, the coach is being asked to maybe sometimes step out of their own kind of normal routine, because now the athlete isn't coming to them with this sufficient amount of motivation to get things done. And that's where the coach sometimes needs to ask themselves, what do I need to do to, teach the athlete about about being more self-driven? Because a lot of times I think we kind of skip that part. I feel that a lot of times new athletes that come to the sport, they come in because they have this mindset of what they want to achieve. And COVID was a great example, because all of a sudden what they wanted to achieve is now gone. And they question, what do I need? What am I going to do now? Like, is this even something that I should be doing? And I think as a coach, I think that's really the part where we as a community should step up. Like, we have this ability to translate the drive that maybe brought us to where we are right now, still active in our sport, to be able to translate that information to the athlete and say, at the end of the day, even the fact that you come and you work with me, you're only doing this for yourself. Like, there's nothing, you're not trying to please me, or you're not trying to get a result and stuff like that. Those things are just, they are somewhat they're not meaningless, but they're not as meaningful as you make them to be. And this goes beyond the ride this morning. This is something that I'm just really looking to explore, because I think that's a very important aspect. It's looking at when we're looking at an athlete more holistically, it's what their physiology is made of, how they train, what they eat, how well they're sleeping. But it's also being able to orient them in a way that mentally they are resilient, and they have this ability to take on new challenges, and accepting the fact that, yeah, they're going to suffer through it. It's going to be painful. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, but that's the whole point. That's the whole point. And then when shit hits the fan, they can, they don't curl up into a ball and just, hide. They actually say, okay, let's see what I can actually do with this challenge. It's just another challenge. So it's not, sometimes it even goes beyond. I mean, in my experience, a lot of athletes that I worked with, my work with them translated into other aspects of their life. It was really beyond the bike. They changed things at home. They changed things with their families and their businesses and the way that they carried themselves. And I'm not saying that was all to do with me, not at all. I think that that's just the fact that they were exposed to this idea that they can drive themselves without this goal hanging over their head all the time. Like, they could just take those actions that they've adopted and work with them in other places in their lives. And there have been some really exceptional examples. Some of them were actually, they went in directions that I didn't expect, like changing their relationships and stuff like that.
What have you done, Asaf?
I'm not a marriage consultant. Okay, that's not really in my resume.
You heard it here. If you're looking for marriage counseling, Asaf is not your man.
No, don't come this way. No, but I do think that that's really something that is important to carry around as a coach. Like, you have this ability to talk to people in a way that can either cause them to bond to you in order to get their goal. Like, they need to rely on you. They need to lean on you to get to their goal. And then you have another option, which is to teach them to not do so and still get their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to get to. It's that link between motivation and commitment, and where the coach needs to come into play and tell them, listen, motivation will not always be there. Actually, in many cases, it probably won't be there, especially in a sport like cycling. If you're an elite athlete or even just a beginner, there will be many days that you either look at your program or you look outside and it's less than ideal. And you really don't want to do it. But that's really the point where if you go and you just get it done, the payback is huge. And you can really take that and use that as fuel and use that as growth for you as an athlete and you as a person. And it has nothing to do with the person who prescribed that to you. However, at the starting point, they need someone to tell them that. They need to tell them, I'm going to give you everything you need to get to your goals, but I'm not going to be there to hold your hand. You'll have to do it. Mm-hmm. You'll have to do it by yourself. So I'll show you how, and I'll take you for those first few steps. But the first time you fall, you should expect it. You will fall. And it's up to you to carry yourself out of that hole. Like, you have to do it. And I'll wait for you. Like, I'm not running away. I'll wait for you. But if you don't take that challenge and you don't step outside that door when it's shitty outside, you're not going to see, you're not going to reach that potential.
Yeah, I think that's tackles into the foundations of being a coach, right? You're there to support people. Like you're saying, you're there to educate them. So in my terms, I've always found that the best results is when you empower people. You teach them. You're there to help them gain the skills that they need that are limiting them from achieving them. You're trying to help them with consistency. But in my case, I think something that not all coaches think about is helping your clients be the creative side of things. In other words, when your events disappear, how can you use that creativity to replace those with things that are intrinsically valuable to you, right? Where do you get your shits and giggles from writing? And how can we give you more of that? Because you can train towards that. That can become a new motivating goal, right? If you like doing long distance stuff and exploring, awesome. It's tons. My job is to help you, give you ideas, and then for you to take that and be empowered and construct new goals and new adventures for yourself, right? And I think for an athlete, how you should approach it or approach your coaching is to be open-minded and learn, not to just simply wait for instructions and complete the workouts, right? I mean, that's obviously what I'm getting paid to do, but I was just having a conversation with a couple of athletes who are like losing motivation. I'm like, I know I set out the workouts for you to do. Why do you just keep doing them in the same spot? Like, all I want to see is the power profile and the interval times. Doesn't matter what you do them, go explore. If we're doing like VO2s and I want you to do like 5-minute VO2s, like the whole North Shore is open to you. Like, there's tons of places you can practice in. Some of them aren't going to look perfect, but you're going to find new climbs that you love. So, like trying to sift through what the priorities of the workout are, and understanding that there's degrees of flexibility that you can use to get what you want out of it, right? To help you. All these things are there to improve your motivation. Another thing I wanted to touch on, because you sparked the idea, is the levels of intrinsic versus extrinsic, because it's not so black and white, right? Some people, you barely even have to tell them what to do and they're ready to do it, etc., etc. And some people need a lot more hand holding and they want to make sure that they're doing it right, and they will follow your instructions to the nth degree. And it reminded me of a study that I did in university, or a study that I read, where they took groups of children. I can't remember the age, but it was pretty young. It might have been like between 5 and 9. And they gave them a task of trying to balance one tennis ball on top of the other. And that was it. Didn't really give them much more instructions than that. Just to say, hey, let's see if we can balance one on top of the other. And then gave them like anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour to try and do it. And then what would you call, the researchers were kind of looking at how the children went about their task, and to kind of divide them into groups of like how motivated they were to do it. What they found was like there was one particular group of children who, even though the task is literally impossible, they would never stop. They just couldn't. The motivation to do it, just because someone said they could do it, that was enough for them to keep going. And the instructors would literally have to tell them to stop before they would try not to balance the tennis ball. And then there was another group of kids who, if they couldn't figure it out within like 5 minutes, they would just get frustrated, and that was it. They would find something else to entertain themselves with. However, if they were given a reward, then they would do it, right? They would continue doing it. And depending on the degree of the reward would determine the length of time in which they were motivated to try and balance one tennis ball on top of the other. And that's super simple. And it's so descriptive of like what we carry through later on in life. Some people just love riding, and you don't have to even tell them to train. They're going to go out and ride their bike. In fact, some of those people, you have to tell them what you're doing might be disruptive to your training, and help empower them and teach them how to do it. I don't see a whole lot of those people. Most people kind of fit right in between the two, where they need a little bit of extrinsic value. So if you find that you're that way inclined, like you're not just naturally jumping on the bike, figure out what your motivators are. What is going to help you to figure out how to balance your two tennis balls on top of each other. What kind of a reward or value system do you have that you get from writing that's going to keep you motivated to keep pushing on that task until you get it right? Once you figure out that, then it's going to be much more easy to follow through on your training. Put that in there. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I think that really kind of sums it up very nicely. The other thing is sometimes what type of reward you want to give yourself if you're that child who's after 5 minutes looking for something else. I think it's important that the coach doesn't necessarily assign them something that's external to their own training, meaning that you need to go and beat somebody else, right? Go with
Yeah.
somebody, because that's not always there. Like, you need to maybe turn it into something they can actually measure on themselves. And like, for example, I had an athlete who I talked to just recently, and they were struggling a bit with motivation. And I told them, one of the things that I love is to see your post-ride comments. I love to see how you see what you've done and what you found to be good or not good in the ride or the workout. And I told them to give me that feedback, because that's a point of reference for them to try and be better at. Right. So it's not just the ability to improve from workout to workout, it's also the ability to understand, to see what's going on. A lot of times when you do those workouts, just riding your bike and stuff like that, you kind of don't notice what your body's trying to tell you. And I think there's a story that's being developed there, and every time it's a little bit different. But if you're not listening, you're missing out on something that's special. So that can become a really cool motivator, because all of a sudden you don't need somebody else to go along with you. And we're dealing with a very social sport. So that's why having other people around you as a driving force is such a big part of the sport. And we didn't have it now. So a lot of people lost motivation. But if you turn yourself into this storyteller, you use your body to tell you that story and you listen, every day becomes interesting. You learn something. You have this ability to really look at yourself more objectively, and things become really interesting. It may not be something that will carry you through. Well, I don't know. I mean, it can carry you through I know individuals that's how they, maybe not how they started, but once they had this ability to listen to what their body's telling them, they were more curious. And they said, well, this is what my body told me after 4 hours. Let's see what it tells me after 6. And then 6 turned into 10, and then 10 turned into I don't know how long. Maybe they're still out there somewhere. So I think like everything else, when somebody comes in who's novice and they don't really know what are the factors that help you stay motivated in this specific sport, it's our job as the coaches to help them kind of figure things out for themselves, on themselves, and not necessarily always saying this is social and fun and all that, because we both know that that's not always the case. It's our job to give them the basic introduction into the sport in the best way possible, while at the same time tell them, this is something you do for you, and I'm just helping you discover it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to leave that as maybe part 1 for today, and we'll pick up on part 2. So we're going to divide these podcasts into more bite-sized pieces. So then part 2, I actually am just springing this on Asaf. So we'll see how he copes with this. We're going to talk about beet juice today. So I just wanted to have a little clickbait. I know people will definitely want to hear about this. So we'll end here and we'll pick up in just a second. We'll chat with you guys real soon.